Hey Salma, assalamu alaikum. This is your girl Daisy Grant, and I am the founder of Daisy Grant Cares. If you are looking for me, I can be found on Instagram at Daisy Grant, and you can also visit our website, which is daisygrantcares.com. Visit us today, join our volunteer list, and also make sure that you donate to help support the homeless in need. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you so much for being in the Kannon show. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
How was your journey from New Jersey to New York today?
Alhamdulillah, it was good. It was an easy drive.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't, pushed off the road, so alhamdulillah. So it was pretty easy. It was a good ride over.
Mashallah, mashallah. So I've followed you for a couple of years right now. And you're doing some important work in the community and for Islam and humanity at large. So if I were to ask you who is Daisy Grant from your point of view, what would you say?
Daisy Grant, first and foremost, I'm a Muslima who loves Allah, and I love all acts of worship. One being my charity, of course. And then I'm a mom. I'm a mom, formerly a published singer and songwriter, now being a published author soon, inshallah.
MashaAllah.
But, Daisy Grant Cares and Daisy Grant, I am also my organization. I am a lover of people. I am a server, and I am a nurturer. That's really who I am.
MashaAllah.
Alhamdulillah.
So have you always been Muslim, or were you a revert?
I am a revert. However, my story is a little unique because I was raised by a Christian mom and a Muslim dad. So I had the best of both worlds. I went to church on Sunday, and then I also attended Jummah, and I've also, fast during Ramadan, and I learned how to pray. Alhamdulillah. So I did have the exposure of Islam as a kid. And ironically, my mom's brother is who actually introduced Islam to me. And so that's who I would attend Jummah with. That's who I, during Ramadan, who I was with. The first Eid I ever had gone to was with my uncle. And then my father, like I said, my father was Muslim, so a lot of the things that I learned with my uncle was just reiterated in my dad's home.
Mashallah. The reason I laughed because I've heard someone said I'm half Muslim.
Really?
There's no such thing as,
I know.
You know what I mean?
But you know what people think that, because when you talk about like Jews and things like that, people use like, oh, I'm Jewish, as if that's their nationality.
Okay, so how has, like, just a little bit of Islam as you're practicing, being a revert versus a practicing Muslim, it's two different things, right?
It is.
So how has your journey to actually being a practicing Muslim, like what route did you take, and what studies or so on and so forth? How was that transition for you?
So initially, I kind of battled with my desire or my choice to become Muslim, because at first I didn't want to disappoint my mother. That was the biggest thing. So I knew that there was a pull, and there was also like this, what felt like a calling to Islam. But I kind of stayed away from it because, I don't want to disappoint my mom. And so the first thing I just started to do was just read the Quran. That was really the first thing. Now, all of my other siblings from my dad, they have Muslim mothers. So that was a difference between me and them, because they were all raised Muslim. They all have Muslim names. And I just talked to one of my oldest sisters. My eldest sister, in fact, she's a Salafi in Philly. And I kind of started sharing certain things. So she would send dawah to me. And then I actually started to have a dream. I had this dream 3 times. And then in the dream, there's a man saying, Daisy, it's time to pray. And then I would get up, I would put my kimat on, and I would wake up from the dream every time and sujood. And that happened 3 times. I dreamt that dream 3 times. So I told my eldest sister, I'm like, I had this dream, and I shared it with her, and she said, that's a law. That's a law giving and sending Islam to you. Like, you have to stop, fighting it. And I eventually went to Germantown Masjid with my sister, and everything I remembered about even the Adhan and the Iqama being called, I remembered it from childhood. And when it came time to pray again in the ranks, that was my first time praying in the ranks again, and it just kind of like came back to me. And so that's really where it started. I went from not being Muslim at all to being very, very Muslim immediately. Like there was no transition. As soon as I took Shahada, I was wearing Kimar the next day. And I started praying immediately. So I didn't really have that transition. You know, the time that I transitioned was before I took Shahada. Like I started to go through the motions and studying prior to actually, converting. But once I took Shahada, that was it.
You knew that was the route.
Yeah,
MashaAllah. And how's your mom dealing with it right now?
Alhamdulillah, now she's 100% respectful. We respect each other's differences in our understandings. Because Christianity, the Bible has some things that are extremely similar to the Quran, even though there are some things that are different. We're able to have conversations, and some of the principles are still the same.
Absolutely.
And so that makes it extremely easy. It makes it a lot easier for us to, discuss religion and faith, because the core of what's supposed to be, spread and understood is still there.
Right, absolutely. And do you give dawah to your mom? Like, how does that work for?
I do. It depends on it. Most of the time, it happens in conversation. If we're talking about anything in context of religion, or maybe she's curious about, a time of year that we're fasting, and then I can kind of give her certain information around it. I recently was sharing with her about, I think it was just why we pray in the certain directions the certain direction that we pray, what the Kaaba is, who created, who built it, and those things. And then she hears certain names when you talk about, Ibrahim, and you talk about Isaac, and you talk about Noah, and you talk about Musa. And she's like learning, okay, these are the same prophets that are in my book, that are in your book. It, it makes it a lot easier to have certain discussions.
And of course, she sees Islam through your actions.
Absolutely.
That's one of the major ways you give dawah to your family members, right?
Yeah.
MashaAllah. And how are you balancing, let's say, the family life of who you are versus the businesswoman? And is there a balance, or do you say, okay, the charity part of it, it's my business, but that's part of my life also? So how do you balance that?
I think the biggest struggle is, now that I'm a mom, that makes the balance a little harder, because my daughter doesn't necessarily understand fully. I give a lot of my attention to my organization. I also give a lot of attention to my worship, and trying to get a 3-year-old to kind of understand that can be difficult at times. And then just overall, it is a part of my life, to be honest with you. Serving the homeless is really who I am. They're not separate. The hard part is that you have people that are in need 24/7, and I'm one person who's a mom. I can't necessarily be available 24/7, but then I don't want to shut or turn anyone away, even though I'm getting a message at 3 o'clock in the morning or a call at 4 o'clock in the morning. It's almost like when you are in that nonprofit world, you're like a 24/7 business. And that's the part that's difficult, because these are hours that I need to rest, or it can be a time that I need to spend with my daughter. But then it's like, do I sacrifice my time with her to help someone in need? Or how do you do those things? Sometimes my daughter's she's on the road with me. She's out there feeding with me. She's, in tow, because I don't have the luxury of just, giving her to someone else or whatever. So it can be difficult, and just getting people to respect that, although this is a charity, it is still a business.
Right.
Getting people to understand, it's not really appropriate. I know you're in need, but maybe 12 o'clock in the morning contacting someone, it may not be the best time.
Right.
But it happens.
Because when someone is really in need, they're literally in need, and they see you as the person they can call on because you're there for them. Right? So maybe that be the reason they call you. contacted me in the morning.
I've gotten, and I get that, because maybe you weren't in need of my assistance at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, and something happened throughout those 10 hours, 12 hours in the day,
Right.
that now at 12 a.m. or 1 a.m. this is an emergency and you need me to help you. And in those situations, I would do what I can, but it takes away from sometimes my personal life,
Mm-hmm.
Outside of me being an organization, I'm still a mom. I still need my rest because I have a 3-year-old who's, rambunctious and very outgoing and active. So I don't want to be burnt out either. But, sometimes that's probably the difficulty, is just drawing that line, respecting that, yes, this is a place where you can come to get help, but this is also a business, and,
The boundary, you're setting the
there has
boundaries.
to be a boundary.
Mm-hmm. That's perfect. Mm-hmm. And as a woman in society versus a Muslim woman, there's a night and day difference.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you see the role of women in general, let's say, in the current climate, and the role of a Muslim woman in the current climate?
So, I'll say this: society doesn't operate under Islamic legislation. So society is, most of the things that, especially in Western society, that is permissible in society is impermissible in Islam.
Right.
And the things that are permissible in Islam are frowned upon in society. So the idea that, women in society, they're independent, they're ambitious, they're hardworking, they're doctors, they're lawyers, they're all of these different things. Some of them don't feel the need to be married. Some of them don't have an instant desire to be a mom. They're not looking to procreate. They're not looking to nurture. They're looking to further their education and maybe their financial status. Whereas in Islam, women are the nurturers. We're, the teachers. We're supposed to be resourceful with the provisions that our husbands give us. We're all supposed to be modest. This doesn't mean that you can't be ambitious. This doesn't mean that you can't be outgoing. But there should be some level of, I don't want to say restraint, but there is definitely some level of, you don't really have to do this because we have men in place, and the roles of a man should facilitate in these areas. I think in society you see that the women don't have the men to support them, so they have to support themselves. But in Islam, the men are obligated to maintain their family. So the pressure is different. It's a different pressure, where you can actually focus on being a wife. You can actually focus being a mom. And if you are an entrepreneur, you can focus on that. But the pressure to sustain your family is not necessarily there. And I think that's some of the difference between, society and, women in society and women in Islam.
So, okay, for example, right now, let's say a Muslim woman, she gets her education, she gets her business, and then she has to go into the workforce. Do you think that's a lack of not finding the right match? We're not married, let's say. Because when a woman is so ambitious, she's frowned upon also.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to, from your perspective, do you think women are forced to go to that route, meaning, incline in their careers and so on and so forth, versus just getting married because they can't find a man to marry, let's say, an appropriate man, or a man that would benefit her in this world and the hereafter? So do you think that we are being forced to go into the workforce more so than before right now?
I would say yes. And I think a lot of it, I definitely think that there was a propaganda. I definitely think that there was an agenda to corrupt the house structure in general. So I think that there were things, and there were even people that have, worked for magazines like Cosmopolitan, where editors would say, we would create these stories to empower women to be independent. Even though this wasn't really an issue, we made it the issue, and this sold magazines. This actually helped our publication. But what it did to society, it made women think that, oh, I don't need a man. I can go be independent. I can get my own money. And then, what men started to do was, well, if you can get your own money, then you need to share in all of this stuff that we are responsible for. And now I think that that's why women are in this space where they feel like they're forced into the independence, because unfortunately society has kind of corrupted the traditional concept of marriage, family, unity. And I do think that there are some women that are frowned upon for being overly ambitious. But I think in nature and in just naturally how we were designed innately, we have a time clock.
Biologically.
We biologically, our time will run out. So
absolutely,
your options to become a mom, they're not like men. Men can procreate until they're 100 years old, 200
right.
years old, if they live that long.
Absolutely.
But us women, our biological clock actually ends. And this is the problem, is that you have more women that are not actually staying true to their real nature. And this is not an issue, but I just think that we were divinely created, divinely designed, and I think the commands from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as to what we should be doing respectively, there's a reason for that.
Right.
You don't see the dogs, the cats, and the bears changing their nature. They do what they are designed to do. It's just us that goes against what is natural for us. And I don't think it's anything wrong, but I do think that there was a propaganda that really pushed a narrative to make women more independent than we actually should have to be or naturally desire to be.
And the word independence, or I'm happily single, or you're really not. This is what I say. I have a saying. The only reason you're single is because you're not your type's type. Do you want the man that you wanted doesn't want you. You're not happily single. You want somebody else to co-sign you. That's my thing, right?
That's my feeling too. I do think that there are some women that have been in relationships and it wasn't successful. And maybe in that breaking period, she's like, you know what, this is a happier space for me because maybe I'm conditioning myself to be a better wife. Maybe I'm preparing myself to be a better mom or a spouse. And I can see that small window of time. But when you're 15 years single, 10 years single, 5 years single, I can't believe that you're happily lonely. You know?
Right.
And then you have those women that says, just because you're alone doesn't mean you're lonely. We were created in pairs and we were created for companionship. There's a reason why Allah provided Adam alayhi salam with a companion in Hawa.
Right.
There's a reason why. So I agree. I don't think that there's any woman that can say that she's happily single who desires or who likes men. I'm just gonna say that.
Right, absolutely. And the transition period is fine. You have to work on yourself, meaning, whatever you think would get you to your best version of yourself.
Right.
And I agree with that time period, because in order, the saying, you attract who you are. So if you're at your lowest, I don't know the correct word for it, but I'll say energy or whatever that is, right? Yourself, you'll meet a man at that level. But if you elevate yourself, I think you'll meet that man at that time.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's the same thing, even with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is me paraphrasing, saying that you are upon the religion of your friends. The environment that you are around becomes your market. That becomes your, and I say this often, if you were looking to purchase a house, you can't sell your house for more than the market's value. And so I agree, the more, if you elevate yourself, you'll start to introduce yourself to a different market of men, a different community of people. And so that small grace period, I think, is necessary for some people. But for those that are just like habitually single and they don't really have any intentions on being in a relationship, my question would be, well, what are you doing? Are you fornicating? Are you committing zina? Like, what are you doing in this 10 years? Because I can't believe, and Allah knows best, but I would just say someone that's been sexually active, someone that's, maybe you've been married before. How can you now say that you never would desire a companion in that way?
Right. So how do you advise someone to go from I'm happily single to mimicking rather, or have an example of the Prophet Muhammad's wives, his companions? Like, what do you advise the women who are in a limbo? Like, how can they elevate their mind to get to the next level of, I do need to get married?
So I really think that for me, everything in deliberation is required. You need to actually think about everything you do. You need to be deliberate and intentional about the things that you do, the things that you say, the people that you're around, because it does actually create your world. And I think if a woman doesn't have the mind frame of, I want to be a wife, she'll never be that. So the first thing she needs to, I would suggest, like, well, what is it that you really want out of life? If you haven't decided that, then I think you need to go back to the drawing board. And you really need to see what it is that you are looking to accomplish in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. If marriage is not in that, I would say she needs to speak with someone that is medically capable of addressing maybe some mental disorders, maybe some emotional issues. Maybe you need to see a therapist, a psychiatrist. Maybe you need to sit with the imam. Maybe you need to, be a little bit more diligent in your studies. One thing about the Quran for me is that each time I read it, it gives me something new.
Absolutely.
And if you have the intention to have a softer heart, Allah will give you a softer heart. If that's your desire, Allah will, fulfill that desire for you. And so I think that she has to be intentional. You have to be deliberate in your prayers. You have to be deliberate in your actions. Sometimes for some people, salat is not easy for them. Sometimes making their salat is a hardship, right?
Yeah.
But you're gonna get the reward because you did something that you didn't feel up to do, but you did it anyway. And I think that's the push that people have to have. Like, going to work out is not easy, but you have to have that willpower even on the days that you don't feel like doing it, to do it. And I think women have to have that willpower to surpass this stage of, I don't want a husband, or I'm happily single. No. If you know in the long run you don't want to be by yourself, be honest with yourself about that. And then that's going to be the starting point for you to make, better steps to progress towards it.
And the other thing I've noticed is the lack of the studies of who better exemplify what marriage life is, or a woman in Islam is, than the Prophet Muhammad's wives and companions.
Right.
If we don't study their lives, how are we going to know what's actually correct?
Right.
So I think our community also needs to start intentionally say, hey, I'm going to study Khadija radiallahu anha, or Aisha radiallahu anha, and so on and so forth. And where do you think that they should start that? Like, when is it? Before self-improvement? We have to self-care and stuff like that.
I think it's important. Now, there is some pressure. I will say that there is some pressure, because these were righteous women. There is pressure. We will probably never be anywhere remotely close to those women.
No.
So there is some pressure, but I think that when you make the attempt, when you have the intention, that's the starting point. You have to have the intention. If you don't have the intention in the right place, then you're likely not going to go where you're trying to go. I think certain things that you feel, how do you handle jealousy? That could be one thing that may be troubling for a woman, which is why she doesn't want a husband right now, because she can't trust a man. Okay, you need to understand that the Prophet ﷺ and his wives, they had to deal with jealousy in their marriages. Aisha radiallahu anha, she was someone that showed jealousy towards the other spouses. We got to look at, yes, this is a natural thing. It's okay to feel these things. But let's also look at how they were resolved, how these issues were handled. What did the Prophet ﷺ do? How did he comfort these moments? Did he become, upset? Did he reprimand her? Or was he patient, and did he allow her to have that moment? So I think at all times it's really good to know those kind of stories. But I know for me, it was times where maybe I was stressed out and I really didn't know where to go. Alhamdulillah for Google, because I could put in the Google search ayats for stress.
Right, absolutely.
Du'as for stress or sleepless nights. I mean, the virtues. I mean, the fortress of Islam? Is it the fortress of Islam?
Yeah.
That book is a book of du'as. you can have that. I would carry that. I would keep it in my car. I would have it in my purse, because you can go different chapters in that section of the book, and it will give you specific du'as that you can say for anxiety, or for leaving the home, or for having a more restful night, or whatever it could be. So that could be a starting point. You don't have to be a student of knowledge to know everything, but Google has been a friend for me,
Right.
and that could be a starting point for someone else as well.
And just the they have to know exactly if it's correct or not. Also, the source.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Because there's a lot of deliberately they mislead.
Absolutely. Yeah. I will say that you do want to verify and confirm that you are getting an authentic hadith, and even with the du'as, you want to be, you want to make sure that you know what you're saying. You want to make sure that this is a good du'a, and then it doesn't have to be a du'a that you're reading from a book or from the internet. You can speak sincerely from your heart and ask Allah, for these things.
Absolutely. So now that we as Muslim women, we're sometimes society tells us that we're oppressed, even though they see us being doctors, lawyers, businesswomen, PhDs, moms, and so on and so forth. We're still considered oppressed. So what do you say to that?
Well, of course, the oppressor would say that,
Uh-huh.
because Islam gives women so much freedom, and especially in our society today, they want to make you believe that you're free, but you're not.
Right.
And saying that a woman has a right to expose her body, she does have a right to expose her body, but I also have a right to cover it.
Right.
And who do you think is going to be more precious? What do you think is going to have or hold more value? Most people, when they get to something good, it has to be unwrapped, whether it's your candy, whether, these things, if you're getting a gift, you typically want it to be wrapped. And that's not to, shun anybody that's struggling with covering or anything like that, but that's the propaganda. That's the agenda. The agenda is to make it seem like if you do something that's correct, or if you do something that is actually liberating, because guess what? We're choosing this. Right. We're choosing this despite the society, despite what we see on media, despite the propaganda on radio, TV, music videos. We're choosing this, and this is actually liberation, because no one is controlling whether or not I wear this or not. They'll say, oh, that's not freedom, that's oppression, because you want to continue to warp the minds of these girls thinking.
Women. Mm-hmm.
You want to do that. And to me, that's the real oppression, is that you have women that believe if they're not naked that they're not valuable.
Right.
That's more oppression than a sister that's in hijab, or maybe even if she's not covered in niqab or jilbab, but she has her hair covered and her body is not overly, exposed. She's choosing something, and she's not losing it because she's not exposing it. But some of these women, they're losing themselves, exposing themselves.
Exactly.
And so, I think that that's, again, another agenda.
Right, absolutely. And we're literally doing this to please Allah. My thing is, if I had to do this for a man, it wouldn't last over a weekend.
Right.
Because it's really tough. We have 50 million layers on. It's hot. It's not a joke. Like, we're not gonna sugarcoat it, but we're doing it because the price of Jannah is not cheap.
It's not.
It's very expensive.
It's not.
Sacrifices. You have to do certain things. There's so many rules and regulations, but it's really to safeguard ourselves and our iman and our souls.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now I have a last but not least.
Okay.
So what is your goal? Your future plans with? Are you married?
No.
Do you plan on getting married?
I do plan on getting married, inshallah.
Inshallah. And how do you think that now, from the single mom that you are and the businesswoman you are, how would you adjust to the marriage life?
I'm a little more unorthodox when it comes to the marriage phase, because I don't want to marry a stranger. And I know in Islam, it's more common that you may not know your suitor very well. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this is me paraphrasing, says that you don't learn learn a person until you live with them, do business with them, or travel.
Right.
And so, you know, you have 2 or 3 sit downs with the brother. Do you really know this brother? Likely you may not.
Right.
For me, I kind of want to take my time. I'm also not looking to, you know, social media is being used frequently now for meeting people, but I want more of a traditional. So the gentleman that I am intended to, this was someone that my wakil suggested. This is someone of his recommendation, and I didn't move on his recommendation immediately. It took a year before I even said okay, you know, but it was just me taking time. And then even in that, it's like, okay, let's communicate in a halal manner. If we see each other, it's in a halal manner. And I'm not going to rush to get married because I want to make sure that I don't have to worry about divorce. So I'm taking my time.
Okay, so now I'm going to have to...
But I do have a time frame.
Okay, good. Because, you know, like Prophet Sallam said, you really won't know somebody unless you're connected with those type of business. They're living together. And how do you do that is through living together through marriage.
Right.
So you'll never know a person truly unless you know a person truly, right? So
but you know what I will say though, what time does, time does eventually reveal things. And the one thing I say when getting to know a person, you have to see them go through certain phases, like certain seasons have to happen, and you just have to see where their character and their temperament is going to be. You know, whether you want to see them when they experience a loss, whether it's a loss of a loved one or a loss of finances or a loss of opportunities. What's their character like in that moment? The same, what's their character like when they gain things, when they have money, when they have financial opportunities, when things are going great, what's their character? And I find that when I've not hasted so quickly to have the halal of a companion, the halal of holding hands, the halal of sex, the halal of having a man, a lot of the times you can uncover certain things just with time kind of showing itself. You know, what is your character if my wife's kill is around and say we're doing a charity event? You know, there was brothers that, you know, you didn't donate to my foundation or you didn't come out to feed the homeless amongst other Muslim volunteers. To me, that shows a lot, because then I would say, what would your interest be if I were your wife? Right. I need a husband that loves to give charity. That's important to me, and it should also be very important to him. So that's something that would kind of like say, okay, yeah, this is, you know, this is someone that I could probably be on the same page with. But I think a lot of deception is out here. I think there are a lot of great pretenders. I think in a 2 or 3 sit down, you can, you know, say a couple surahs. You can talk about some stories that you know that you've read from the Quran or from the hadiths of the Prophet or his companions, and you can do that very well. And then you marry the sister and you're a woman beater, or maybe you're a pedophile, or maybe you don't actually make your you don't actually perform your prayers consistently or on time, or maybe you don't go to Jummah. Like, those things are important. I need to see the brother at Jummah every Friday because I'm there.
Right.
You know,
so I think I like the way you're doing it as far as, you know, having someone else involved. So for us, we get emotionally attached to a person, let's say we're attracted to, right? But a man can decipher between his, the emotion versus the logic part of it and reality part of it, because it really gets blurred.
For sure.
For women.
For sure.
So that now that you have an actual man being your wakil, right? That can help you through this, and I think that's a good plan, right? And then you do have a time. Don't is it a 5-year plan, please?
No. I definitely wouldn't. I wouldn't advise anyone to pass 1.5 years, and I think even that is more than sufficient.
Islamically, I would think that's too much, though. 1.5 years.
It's more than sufficient. For me, it's a little different because I have a daughter.
Yeah.
So my transition is not just for me. My transition is also for her.
Absolutely.
And I don't want to just introduce anybody to her. You know, I see some sisters that have children and they are okay with marrying a guy one day. The kids know nothing about the guy, and then the next day, this is your stepdad. That's a transition that I think some women need to consider. And then you also have people that, you know, they get married because you don't really know the person, and it doesn't last 6 months or a year. And now your children are involved in this. And then you do it again a year later, and a year after that, and a year after that. And then you have yourself marrying 4 and 5 different husbands in 4 or 5 different years, and your children have had to transition 4 or 5 different times. So for me, I know my timeline is a little more unorthodox for most people, but it just more comforting to me. And I feel like a man that's, you know, that's abstinent, you know, and he's not, you know, involved with anyone in that way, as I'm not, that just shows more to this character. And then I also feel like we'll probably be able to get through tougher times, because that's a jihad in itself. You know, our desires and the shaitan's whispers are really, 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 that can be a struggle to, you know, to fight. That can definitely be a struggle. But I think someone that's disciplining themselves, and someone that's, you know, really doing it for the sake of Allah, I think it'll be a lot more rewarding. This is just my view, though.
As long as you're safeguarding yourself, selves rather, and then, you know, and then,
because I don't, we, you know, it's better to, in my opinion, it's better to communicate always with the third party, right? That's the safest way to go. Right. There is a sister that, you know, she said that she would speak to her husband, and I think it could have been an extended period of time, but she would email, they would communicate through email, and her dad was CC'd on every email. And they might have done that for 6 months or 8 months before he proposed, or maybe he proposed but before they got married. And that worked. You know, and she said once they got married, her father was like, please take me off the email chain or whatever. Right. But, you know, as long as you're doing it in a halal manner and you're safeguarding yourself, I think the rush is not, you know, I don't really think the rush is necessary, but I would definitely not recommend years. I wouldn't recommend that. I think 6 months to a year is more than enough time, in my opinion. But I think some people that move a little faster than that, a lot of the times their marriages don't last beyond 6 months to a year.
The goal is to stay married.
Right.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
And as far as your Daisy Grant Cares organization, what is your goal for that? So the goal overall is, one, to actually eliminate homelessness. So I would love to get to a place where my organization has housing and housing programs that will permanently get homeless people off the streets and have them either as homeowners, or that they have a residential home that will never not be theirs. I thought about, you know, maybe the tiny house thing in communities of tiny houses, building them and then giving these people, maybe they make them buy it for $1, because I think the law requires that you actually have to pay for the property. But say we sell the tiny home for $1, now they are officially a homeowner. If they chose to sell it, they can do that, but at least they have a home, they have a place to live, they have a place to stay, and they're not on the street. And then this belongs to them. They have the deed to this particular plot. They own this home, and, you know, hopefully our organization, and maybe through the state and the government, we would have the assistance where maybe there would be a very small tax on that particular area, where they're not paying the same amount of taxes as a regular person that has money or whatever. We spend trillions and millions and billions of dollars in the welfare system, but we don't have any programs that's allocating these people to transition from the welfare system to home ownership. Right.
Why not have those funds transition people from homelessness, maybe into the Section 8, you know, welfare system, and then transition them out of that into their own home ownership? Or let's forget the middleman. Let's just get them from the street to a home. But again, that's really, really big, because you have some people that, of course, they may not have the best manners, they may not have the best education, they may not have the best money management skills. So I would also like to have areas and departments that will facilitate in teaching these things, teaching these skills, home economics. You know, some people have been on the streets 10, 15, 20 years. They may
Right.
have not had a consistent shower. Maybe they haven't laid in a bed in a decade. Maybe they don't know how to maintain and manage the cleanliness of their home because they've been in, you know, dirt and debris for so long.
Mm-hmm.
So that may need to be taught. So I would definitely want to have different avenues where it's a transitional, and I don't want to call it recovery, but it's almost like a recovery, and then also some of them do have addictions, so helping them transition from out of their addictions into recovery, and then maintaining a job, maybe employing them, and then giving them a salary that they can live off of, and things like that. So that's the overall goal. The overall goal is for me to end homelessness and then facilitate in those areas to keep people off the streets. Because I don't want to have to feed everybody every day. I want to be able to reacclimate the homeless with society, get them back to being maybe entrepreneurs. I mean, there's so many people on the street that you would have to think that they have to be extremely intelligent to survive on the street.
Absolutely. They have their own network system.
They have their own systems. I mean, even how some of them build things. These are carpenters. These are electricians. These are people that actually have skill. And sometimes it just takes an opportunity, to put that to work. So that's what I would want to do. Let's not give them just a cleaning job. Some of them are better than pushing the mop and the broom, and not saying there's anything wrong with that, but then if you have them pushing the mop and the broom, you should give them a fair salary like everybody else on your staff, so that they can actually live. I think the main issue for homeless people is not that they don't want to be homeless, it's because they're not getting the money. Some of them are on disability, or some of them do get government assistance, but it's not enough to pay a rent.
Right, especially depending on what state and city you're living in.
Right.
In New York City, I believe there are more $10,000 apartments than $2,000 apartments. And then how much I don't know how much the government gives a person in need that can actually afford stuff like that.
And $2,000 is a lot for an apartment.
And I'm saying in New York City,
right,
and the $10,000 is more.
I know.
More of $10,000, close to $10,000 apartments than of $2,000 apartments. Right. And even $2,000 apartments for one family, income family, it's not sustainable.
Right, it's very difficult. But that's the system.
Yeah.
That's the system. The system is not really built for, and unfortunately, these areas are, predominantly filled with minorities. These are not areas that are predominantly filled with people that are making $80,000, $100,000, $200,000, or a few $1 million. You see people that are usually spending every check just to survive, and that's not survival.
That's not living. That's
not
literally
living.
surviving.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
You should want to be able to enjoy life. No one should have to go to work only so that they can live.
Yeah.
And then barely staying afloat.
Absolutely.
So I think that's another thing where Daisy Grant Cares wants to go. We want to be able to employ, and we want to give people living salaries, wages that will keep them off the street.
Right.
And even if there's like a natural disaster or something happens that can cause you to be homeless, because homelessness doesn't just always come from drug addiction or, losing a job or something like that. Homelessness can happen because you had a house fire, or there was a tornado, there was a flood. We know that can happen too. But at least in those instances, maybe you have enough money to have homeowners coverage. Maybe you have enough money in your savings where you will not be homeless for long. That's the issue. A lot of people, they fall and they don't have any resources to get back up. And we're trying to ultimately be the resource to keep them up versus them, just only feeding on the street.
That's a beautiful plan, Mel. Let me grant that to you and your organization. And thank you so much for being in the Kannon Show. I really, really appreciate you and your time.
Thank you for having me. This was good.
Alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.